Thank you to the Ripon Society for the opportunity to be here this morning. And I come from a little town on the eastern plains of Colorado called Yuma. I'm sure all of you know where that is. If you're ever through Colorado, it's the place that goes by on the bottom of the television screen, "Hailstorm coming, take cover." But it's also the part of eastern Colorado that most people associate Colorado with mountains, although I do have Rocky Mountain National Park in the district. The vast majority of the district is the high plains of Colorado. I just want to share some of the experiences that my district has had over the past several years when it comes to energy development. Colorado is truly an incredible energy-rich state. When we talk about the need for an all-of-the-above energy policy, when we talk about the need to have an abundant, affordable energy policy that really runs and drives our economy, there's really no place better to look at than the 4th Congressional District of Colorado. This is an area that has seen tremendous development in recent years in oil and natural gas. In fact, one county in northern Colorado called Weld County is one of the only counties in the nation with zero bonded indebtedness. There are 31 operating oil and gas companies in that county alone. 2 of them paid their 2011 property taxes 2 weeks ago, $109 million. Now, one company's check was $52 million, one company's check was $57 million. Talk about incredible opportunities for school districts, for hospital districts, for local communities as those developments occur and the jobs that they bring. This is a district that has wind blade manufacturing. It has nacelle manufacturers, Vestas Energy, 2,000 employees in the district. Has solar manufacturing. Has biofuel, has 3 or 4 biofuel plants throughout the district. And the new 4th Congressional District, after redistricting, will even have a coal-fired power plant. It has coal-fired power plants, but it also will have a coal mine in the district as well. And the district is an incredible hotbed for energy activity. But if we're going to keep it that way, then we have to make sure that Washington doesn't do what it seems to do best these days. That's getting in the way. I ran for Congress because I believed we needed to get government out of the way and let America work. And if we're going to get back to this notion of an energy policy that is abundant and affordable, then we have to do that again to get government out of the way so that we can let you do what you do best. And that's run your businesses the way that you know how. And so if you take the EPA's own words, if you take the President's own words, and I think we should, you know exactly what's happening to our energy industry today. During his campaign, the President said that he believed energy costs would necessarily skyrocket under his plan. Secretary Chu has said that he would like to see energy prices rise to the level of those in Europe. We saw comments made during the campaign by Joe Biden, Senator Biden, about his beliefs and thoughts when it came to coal. And so if you take them at their word, then you can see a direct link to the policies that they are creating. Utility MACT. Under the EPA's own analysis, Utility MACT would cost $9.6 billion. That's their own analysis, the most expensive regulation ever put forward. If you listen to the other rules and regulations being promulgated, attempts to regulate greenhouse gas, boiler max regulations, coal ash regulations, all of which we know from their own testimony would increase the cost of electricity and energy. We had Assistant Administrator Gina McCarthy before our committee just a couple of weeks ago, Assistant Administrator of the EPA, Gina McCarthy, just a couple of weeks ago. And I asked her a very simple question: are energy costs going to increase under this plan? And she said, yes, but I don't live in the energy world. Now, here is an agency that is living in the energy world and then denying that they're doing so. It's pretty incredible to see the impact that their policies are having on the cost of doing business in this country. And energy isn't just a cost borne by just a few. It's a cost that's borne by every single one of us, from the poorest to the wealthiest, to power our homes, to power our businesses, and to make our lives better. But what are we doing about it? I think that's the most exciting thing. When we come back, and yesterday we actually introduced a bill, the Developing Energy and Jobs Act, that is a combination of about 7 pieces of legislation that will dramatically increase domestic energy production. I have one title in the bill. I'll be carrying the bill, the package. But one of the bills is the Strategic Energy Production Act. It says simply this: if the President believes we're in an emergency situation that is dire enough that it requires accessing the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, then we need a long-term policy solution as well. And so if you draw down the reserve by 5%, then it requires an increase in permitting on federal lands by 5% as well. We plan to increase permitting on federal lands by 5%. Moving from a quick fix political decision to a long-term policy solution. Other bills, other legislation, Chairman Whitfield, it's an honor to serve with him on his committee. We'll actually have a bill in the package as well dealing with the gas regulations, and I'm sure he'll talk more about that. But the bottom line is we have an opportunity to increase domestic energy production. We've seen it in wind, we've seen it in oil, we've seen it in natural gas. The technologies that we can drive, the solutions that we can bring. But the problem we face is whether or not our government, the regulatory environment that we face, will allow that innovation to continue. If you look at the success that has taken place in natural gas, 10, 15, 20 years ago, nobody knew the resource that we had domestically. Nobody knew the size of what we could accomplish. But unfortunately, because of that success, we've seen a lot of attacks on it as well. And so we have to make sure that we're doing everything we can to provide our country with the policy we need to drive jobs, to power our economy. And there's really no better industry suited to power our economy like the energy industry. And so as we look for other ways to rein in regulations, as we look for other ways to promote and increase domestic energy production, I'm sure that we look forward to fighting and standing with every single one of you as we do our best to provide this country with the secure energy that we need. So with that, I'd be happy to answer your questions. I know we're going to do that later. I hope where'd Jim go? We're asking, we have time for questions later. Very good, but I do want to thank Chairman Whitfield for his service as chairman of the subcommittee. Thanks for putting me on your subcommittee. It's been an honor to serve, and certainly with John Sullivan. My district is 32,000 square miles. It borders Oklahoma. It's bigger than the state of South Carolina, and whenever I say that, inevitably somebody like Cynthia Lummis comes up to me and says, well, yeah, my district's as big as Wyoming.
Thank you, Corey. Great job. And Corey's doing an excellent job on the Energy and Commerce Committee. Thanks for all your work, hard work, and he's a rising star doing a great job on the committee. And it is an honor to be vice chair under Ed Whitfield. Ed's a great chairman of this great committee in Congress, and I've learned a lot from Ed, and thank you, Ed, for your leadership and all you do. And we on the Energy and Commerce Committee are on the front line of defense against this radical Obama agenda. Us Republicans now, we control 1/2 of 1/3 of the government. And a lot of the major legislation from healthcare to energy policy is coming through this committee. We're ground zero against this administration. And you look at our energy policy in this country, we don't have one. We need to have an energy policy in this country. Now, my mom, I talk to her about every night, pretty close to her. My dad died when I was young, so I'm pretty close to my mother. And I call her and I tell her what I'm working on in Washington. And she asks me, and I'll tell her about the Energy and Commerce Committee and what we're working on. She doesn't really understand what I'm talking about, but I'll tell her some of the things we're working on, and I say, yeah, we need to lessen our dependence on foreign oil and all that. And she said, we're doing all these bills with natural gas or oil or coal, and she says, nothing's going to happen. I said, why do you say that, Mom? That hurts my feelings. You have no faith in your son? And she said, John, they've been talking about that for 40 years and nothing's ever happened. You know what? My mom's right. My mom's right. We need to have something happen in our energy policy in this country, and we don't have it. Right now, we're sending over $1 billion every single day to foreign countries to buy foreign oil. And a lot of those countries, OPEC countries, they hate our guts. In some instances, we're funding the war against ourselves. And we're subsidizing other economies and other nations. And it's not right. It's a national security issue. That in and of itself should motivate us to take action, but it doesn't. We have our Navy escorting tankers in the Strait of Hormuz that cost billions of dollars a year additionally in the cost. We have an abundance of natural resources here in the United States that God has given us under our feet that we're not utilizing to its full potential. We have over 120 years, like Corey was talking about, of natural gas here in the United States. And we need to utilize it. We have a lot on public lands too that Obama's holding the key, won't unlock that for us. And as you see with the Bakken and other plays around the country, there's a lot of potential for oil, billions and billions of barrels of oil. And we need to utilize that. We use about 20 million barrels of oil a day. We're importing about 12 million barrels of oil a day. And a lot of that's refined into transportation fuel. So it's very important that we explore and we succeed in getting more trucks, buses, fleets, cars running on natural gas. And we can do that through many ways. One of the most important ways, like Corey was addressing, is a regulatory burden for that to occur. If Bud and I were going to start a company to convert vehicles to natural gas, we could do that. Probably be a good business to get into. But through the regulatory burden and the things you have to do to be certified on a per vehicle basis, it's not just to get the open business and start converting vehicles. If we want to do F-250 trucks, we'd have to be certified on F-250 trucks. And it could cost us about $150,000 to go through that regulatory process to start converting vehicles. That's too expensive for us to get into that. We need to lessen those burdens. We need to help the manufacturers in some way produce vehicles that run on natural gas. Right now they manufacture cars and trucks that run on natural gas for sale in Europe, Asia, Latin America. In Europe, Asia, Latin America, they have 15 million natural gas vehicles. Here in the United States, we have 130,000. We have a lot of catching up to do. And that's something we can do one of the things we can do in all of the above strategy to lessen our dependence on foreign oil. But also, this helps create jobs in America. If we started this in a robust way, we'd have to build infrastructure through the major traffic lanes, east and west, north and south. And it'd be like a mini industrial revolution in our country. It would create over hundreds of thousands of private sector jobs without one penny from the federal government. We also need to look at a way in this country that we can become energy self-sufficient. Not totally independent, because we never will be. We have to be honest about that. We're always going to need oil from somewhere else. But we can reduce it greatly and become energy self-sufficient if we look at our energy policy in this country. And we look at where we need to fix things, and one is our refining capacity in this country. We need to expand it. Because of the regulatory burden in this country, we haven't built a new refinery in 30 years. 40 years, sorry. 40 years. Haven't expanded an existing one. And one of the things the president came to Oklahoma to do, he said, you know what? He had that little energy tour around the country. Well, he stopped in Cushing, Oklahoma. It's a major pipeline intersection of the country, a lot of storage there. And he stood there in Oklahoma in front of about 30 people. He wouldn't let anybody in because he knew that that's not a good state for him. And he said, I, through executive order, want to expedite the southern part of the Keystone Pipeline. Well, Mr. President, it's going to happen in spite of you. We don't need your help. It's going to happen because of the free enterprise system in states and fish and wildlife. It's already done. But this president, who held himself out like that, who hates this industry, wants to kill it, 2 weeks before was lobbying the Senate and on that transportation bill to not allow an amendment on the northern part of the Keystone Pipeline, the one that means something, that does something for this country. And we need to, with the Bakken up there, with all that oil, we must have that pipeline infrastructure to bring that oil and crude down to our refining systems so we can refine it. And that oil is great. And get it down to Cushing and around our whole country. So we need to look at our refining capacity. We need to look at natural gas vehicles. We need to look at an all of the above strategy where we use coal, we use oil, we use natural gas. Yes, we do need to look at alternative energy sources too. But right now, let's face it, wind and solar aren't base load. It's not there yet. Maybe someday that it will be. But we have everyone going around the country like Paris Hilton I saw her the other day and said, let's go green, man, on her t-shirt. I don't even know if she knows what that means. And then we have Rob Lowe come up here and tell us about plug-in hybrids and stuff like that. I don't try to act. I mean, hell, I don't know why he's but, I mean, these people think that this is free or something. I have people come up to me and say, why don't we use wind and solar? Hell, it's free. I'm like, no, it's not. It's very expensive. Very expensive. But you know, someday we can get there. It's not to say that we shouldn't, research and develop that, and look at it, and let the free enterprise do that and work on it. And someday it may be viable. But you know what? We can't shoot the horse we're on now until we have one to get on. You know, coal is a cheap energy source. It's abundant. It's always going to be there. It's not going to leave. We need it. This country, this economy, runs on cheap energy. That gives us a competitive advantage. You know, a lot of coal and even natural gas companies are saying, heck, I'm going to export my product. Well, I don't blame them. If our government won't let them use it here, they should be able to export it. Because, you know, China is scouring the world for resources right now. And how idiotic would that be to not use our own resources here? Where are we, a third world country? We don't want to do that. So we need to work on an energy policy that helps us be self-sufficient, look at the regulatory burden. You know, one of the biggest things I hear when I go around the country or in my state is they say, hey man, what are you going to do to be a politician to create jobs in America? And I always tell them, nothing. I'm not going to do a damn thing to create jobs in America. But what we can do is get the hell out of the way here in Washington. And that's what's happening, this regulatory, but capital, there's a lot of money out there. Debt financing's cheap, private equity's abundant. That money's out there, but that capital, it's a coward. It goes to the easiest path, not the most resistant path. And if we can lessen some of these burdensome government regulations, like Corey was talking about, utility MAC, the EPA stuff, that would go a long way in getting people back to work. Streamlining the permitting process in the Gulf, you know, making sure that permitorium gets lifted. Oil production in the Gulf, which we get about 30% of our oil, give or take, from the outer continental shelf and deep water, is down. Oil 14%, gas 14%. I mean, that's not good. And when one of those rigs leaves out there, it takes a lot of jobs with it. We can't snap our fingers on when gas prices spike back up and bring them back in immediately. Or out on the coast of Africa or somewhere. So we need to do all we can. We need to treat energy policy like a Manhattan Project. We need to make sure we solve it, that we become energy self-sufficient by the year 2020, and we can do that if we come together with a comprehensive plan to get it done. And with that, I'll stop talking. Thank you very much.
You know, a couple of weeks ago I was down in Henderson, Kentucky in my district, and I went to an elementary school, and we actually had a little press conference there that they wanted to imitate, like, Meet the Press. And one of the very first questions that was asked was, these were sixth graders, by the way, and this young lady stood up and she said, I'd like to know how much money lobbyists give you. And as I thought about that question, I'm really delighted to be here today because we have so many lobbyists here. And and by the way, after she asked me that question, I asked them, how many of you want to be lobbyists? And no one raised their hand. So I'm delighted to be here at the Ripon Society. And I'm delighted that Jim Councilman and the board have done such a great job of revitalizing the Ripon Society, and through the years it's contributed in so many ways, and I really want to thank all of you for the contributions that you make, financially as well as others. And you know, I think John Sullivan did a great job of providing a metaphor for our energy policy, and that is don't shoot the horse you're on until you have another horse to ride. I've never really heard that before, John. That was good. And being with Corey Gardner, I tell you, he's really brought some enthusiasm to our committee, full committee as well as subcommittee, because he's a very articulate fella and certainly understands energy. And we have a great team over at Energy and Commerce. And Bud, you would like to be back there right now. We're passing a lot of legislation and trying to slow down EPA in many ways. But as you know, we don't have a lot of success on the United States Senate side. So as we approach this election in November, I think the responsibility we have right now, in addition to continue to pass legislation and primarily to set up a contrast between our policies that we're advocating and the policies that the president is obviously advocating. I think that in Kentucky, by the way, we had our primary a couple weeks ago, and on the Democratic primary, you either had a choice of voting for Barack Obama for president or uncommitted. And we have 120 counties in Kentucky, and the uncommitted won 68 of them. So I don't think there's any chance that Barack Obama's going to win the state of Kentucky. But the sad thing about it is, and the reason I believe that he's in serious trouble around the country, is that he really squandered a great opportunity. And I think it all started when Rahm Emanuel, if you'll remember, right after the election, made the comment that it's a shame to let a crisis go to waste. And he was talking about the recession and the slow economy and how they were going to use that to pursue their political goals, which I think they viewed as more important than really stimulating the economy. And in a nutshell, what they ended up doing was they took these stimulus funds, and as you know, our federal debt has increased $5 trillion in the short period of time that Barack Obama's been president. But they took that stimulus fund and they used it as a slush fund in many ways, because they funnel money primarily into green energy projects. Now, as John has said and Corey has said, we all recognize that green energy has a role to play. But to use that amount of money for projects like Solyndra and Fisker Automotive and Tesla Automotive, even if those cars are produced, and some of them are, the price tag is $200,000, and this president, who claims to be for the average American, I don't think he's showing a lot of concern for the average American funneling money the way he's been funneling it. And for him to claim that his administration is going to be revolutionary and more ethical than any administration in recent memory, and then to funnel $538 million to Solyndra, which is controlled by George Kaiser, who lives in Oklahoma, one of the wealthiest men in America, who's bundling money for the president. And then his lawyers, the lawyers for Solyndra, meet with the lawyers for the Department of Energy and the White House, and in setting that deal up, make certain that if they do go bankrupt, that their venture capitalists, their private investors will get their money back first, even before the taxpayers get their money back. So this president talks a good game. And he frequently says one thing and his administration does the other. And the reason we get so exercised about it, because if we are going to create a strong economy in America again, which we know we can do, energy is going to play a vital role in that. And many of you, I'm sure, read where Harold Hamm, who basically developed the Bakken Field, talked about going to the White House and how he had never met President Obama. And he was looking forward to going down to the White House and talking to him. And he said that he did meet with him, and he explained how the Bakken Field area, the unemployment rate was around 3%, all the jobs that were being created. In fact, they couldn't find enough qualified people to work up there. All the oil was being produced. And that if the president would just spend as a token amount of time and energy and money on developing our own natural resources, fossil fuels being one of them, just a portion of that amount of money and stimulation that he's done for green energy, that we could dramatically lower unemployment rates around the country and be less dependent on foreign oil and other sources. And he said the president looked at him and said, well, We know that we're going to have fossil fuel for a few years, but after that, we've got to go green energy. Well, I think that demonstrates how really out of touch he is, because we know that the base load is going to have to be dependent upon our fossil fuels, and we're developing technology, and we do have opportunities to explore other energy sources, and we should. And but this president, and yesterday we had a hearing, for example, and we were talking. These people all worked in Region 6 of the EPA, and Mr. Armendariz decided not to come to attend that hearing, even though he said he would. But it was really kind of sad to see every witness that had worked with Region 6 EPA said there's a strong bias against fossil fuels. There's a lack of collaboration with the entities that are trying to produce energy in America. There's little regard for scientific evidence, and we feel like we're dealing with a government that is an adversary to what we're trying to do, instead of reaching out with a helping hand to try to solve these problems together. And so the American taxpayers out there working hard every day, and we all go home to our districts, and we talk to people who don't have jobs. We talk to people who want to invest money. We talk to people who want certainty in regulations and economic policy. And they really feel adrift right now, and they feel like this government is working against them as much as it is trying to help them, for the simple purpose that this government is pursuing its own political goals more than really trying to stimulate the economy, because we have a great opportunity to do it, and I think it's been squandered in a way. If we had just spent more of that money on infrastructure projects, we have great infrastructure needs in our country today. In fact, in my district alone, we lost one of the bridges over one of our major highways down there, 6880, about 4 months ago. It was a bridge that was built about 70 years ago, and it's just a shame that more of that stimulus money didn't go for infrastructure projects, really shovel-ready projects, which it was sold to the American people that these would be shovel-ready projects. And that's another thing that has been really disappointing to me, is just, I think the American people, when Barack Obama came to the presidency, genuinely felt this is a real opportunity for America. He is so charismatic, and he is such a great speaker. And I'll never forget, one day I was in the airport even before he announced to run for president, and I really didn't even know who he was. But I was at one gate getting ready to go to Nashville, Tennessee, and the next gate there was a plane going to Chicago, and this guy walked in, and all of a sudden everybody over there stood up and started applauding and whistling and yelling, "Barack Obama, Barack Obama." And he hadn't even announced for president, he hadn't been in the Senate long, but there was that hope that maybe this could be something different. And yet it came home very clear to me, and all of us could give other examples, but on the utility map, which is the most expensive, will be the most expensive regulation ever implemented at EPA. And when they came up, when the president talked about it, when his administration talked about it, when Lisa Jackson talked about it, all of them said that this is necessary because we're going to have so many great benefits because of the reduction of mercury emissions. And every time they talked about it, it was about reducing mercury emissions. And yet, when we talked to the witnesses, when we really got down and looked at the analysis of EPA's own reports, and they finally acknowledged themselves that there was no benefit from mercury reductions. All of the benefits about 99.9% of the benefits came from further reduction of particulate matter, which is already regulated under another part of the Clean Air Act. So this president and this administration in many ways have been misleading the American people. And while I don't think any of us started this Congress wanting to be an adversary, in fact, I think we have a responsibility and obligation to work together to solve the many problems facing our country. And we've done everything that we can do. We've passed legislation to make it easier to invest and develop our natural resources. We passed legislation to try to slow down the plethora of regulations coming out of EPA, to analyze and view the cost of these things, the impact of them before we move forward. So I think we've done everything that we can do, and now we've got an election coming up, and we're going to do everything we can do to be out there in our districts and in our states every day, trying to set up the contrast between this administration and what we think the next one can be. So thank you all very much for giving us the opportunity to be here today. We enjoy working with all of you, and we look forward to working with you as we move forward. Thanks very much.